Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is to give you a real shortcut to understanding the biological side of psychopharmacology.
Mm,
How these tiny molecules are actually engineered to work with the human brain.
exactly. And we're diving into this core idea that psychiatric illness is fundamentally about an alteration of
As
neurotransmitters.
chemical messengers.
The chemical messengers, yeah.
Right.
We're talking
Yeah.
imbalances, maybe deficiencies, or sometimes, just way too much of them. And that is precisely what these drugs are designed to target.
And you can't really fix a problem until you know where it is.
Yeah.
Right? All our mental activity is localized.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can figure out what specific function is off, that tells the chemist exactly where to aim. So like if we're seeing issues with insight or social judgment,
Or even just setting goals.
right, then we know we're talking about the frontal lobe. That's the target.
And then you have the temporal lobe, which connects directly to the limbic system, what some people call the emotional brain.
So the more primal stuff.
Exactly. Aggression, fear, intense sexual drive. When those are misfiring, it tells us the temporal area is where that chemical intervention needs to happen.
So once we have the location, how do we actually send those chemical messengers in? I mean, what are the mechanics here?
Well, let's start with neurotransmission 101. It's a beautifully efficient process, really.
Yeah.
An electrical impulse just zips down a neuron. When it gets to the end, it releases a neurotransmitter.
And that chemical crosses the gap, the synapse.
It crosses the synapse, latches onto a receptor on the next cell, and tells it to either fire or to hold off, to inhibit it.
So a lot of mental health treatment is basically just trying to get that transmission level right. It's a balancing act.
It is, and you see problems coming from both sides. You can have insufficient transmission.
Meaning not enough of the chemicals being released.
That or the receptors on the other side have decreased. They're just not as sensitive
One
anymore.
of the opposites.
The opposite is excessive transmission. Too much chemical is released or the receptors become hyperresponsive. The classic example here is thought disorders like schizophrenia.
Right.
Physiologically, that's often linked to an excess transmission of dopamine. Just too much of it.
So if too much dopamine is one problem and not enough is another, how do chemists actually design a molecule for both? Let's take a specific class, like MAOIs, monoamine oxidase inhibitors.
That's a perfect example. It's really a strategically brilliant insight. Your body has this natural cleanup crew.
Okay.
It's an enzyme called monoamine oxidase, or MAO. Its whole job is to destroy monoamines like dopamine and serotonin.
It gets rid of them.
It gets rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
So an MAOI medication simply inhibits that cleanup crew. It tells them to take a break.
Which means more of those neurotransmitters hang around in the synapse for longer.
Exactly. It corrects the deficiency.
But, and this is huge, but that mechanism creates a really serious paradox.
Yeah.
This is something you absolutely need to know.
Hmm.
That MAO enzyme doesn't just clean up your brain's neurotransmitters. It also destroys an amino acid you get from food called tyramine.
Right. And when you take an MAOI, you stop that whole destruction process. So if you then eat something with tyramine,
Like aged cheese, wine, cured meats.
or even certain over-the-counter decongestants, that tyramine builds up, it floods your system, and it can lead to a potentially fatal hypertensive crisis.
Wow. So a piece of cheese could literally fight your depression medication.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And the key thing here is that this diet isn't just for while you're on the medication.
No. You have to continue it for a full 2 weeks after you stop. You have to give that enzyme time to replenish itself.
That is some deep dive knowledge to hold on to.
At the end of the day, though, it's always a personal equation. Not everyone responds the same way. Cross-cultural psychopharmacology shows us that ethnic variations, they're influenced by genetics, sure, like how fast your liver works.
But also by culture and diet.
Also by cultural beliefs, absolutely.
So let's connect this back. If we started by saying psychiatric illness is about neurotransmitters, what's the bigger picture? We have to talk about psychoneuroimmunology, or P&I.
Right. P&I shows us that inflammation in your body can actually be manufacturing those alterations in your brain.
How does that work?
Well, research is looking at how chronic inflammation releases these things called cytokines, pro-inflammatory chemicals.
And these chemicals have been found to directly reduce neurogenesis. That's the creation of new neurons.
In the hippocampus, which is critical for mood and memory.
So the health of your immune system is directly tied to your brain's ability to repair and grow.
Think about what that really means. If mental illness is a chemical imbalance, and your body's own inflammation is causing that imbalance by slowing down brain repair,
then the line between physical and mental illness it completely blurs. It's maybe not there at all. That idea that something like systemic inflammation can shrink your brain's ability to grow, it forces us to define mental health as something that involves the entire body. And that is a truly profound thought to sit with.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really difficult topic. It's sensitive, but clinically it's absolutely critical.
It really is. We're doing a deep dive into suicidal thoughts, behaviors, and then that whole other complex world of the right to die.
Right. And because the source material is so technical, our mission here is just to distill it down for you.
Mm.
We want to focus on the essential knowledge recognizing risk and understanding the legal frameworks.
Mhm.
So maybe we should just start with a few quick definitions just to get everyone on the same page.
Good idea.
Okay, so first, suicidal ideation. It's simply the act of thinking about self-harm.
Then you have suicide attempts. These are, any willful, self-inflicted acts that are life-threatening but haven't resulted in death.
And finally, completed suicide, which is the intentional ending of one's own life.
And it's important to get a sense of the scale here. The numbers are just staggering. We're talking about approximately 800,000 people globally every single year.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you dig into the data, you see what's called the gender paradox.
Right. This is where statistically more males complete suicide, but more females attempt it.
Exactly. And a lot of that is often chalked up to the methods used. Males tend to use more lethal means. It's a complicated picture.
And the single biggest predictor of future risk, this is so important, it's a previous suicide attempt.
That's the one. Nothing else comes close.
So, given that, what do the clinicians, we reviewed all stress, what's the one thing you have to do?
You must always take any kind of suicidal ideation seriously. And that means you have to ask directly.
Not beating around the bush?
No. The clinical advice is to use the clearest, strongest language you can. Are you thinking of killing yourself?
It's a hard question to ask, but clarity is everything there.
It is. And then there are the other warning signs, the ones that are more insidious.
Yeah, the really counterintuitive one that everyone should know is that sudden, unexpected improvement in mood.
Yes. After a long period of being really depressed.
You might think, oh, great, they're getting better, but it can mean something else entirely, can it?
It can.
Yeah.
Often, making that final decision to commit suicide can bring on a temporary feeling of relief, a sense of calm. It means the plan might be in place.
A kind of resolution. The communication also changes, doesn't it? It can go from overt statements
Like, I wish I were dead.
to something much more covert, like, I won't be a problem much longer.
And that's so dangerous because it sounds like they've found peace. It's not a cry for help. It sounds like a conclusion.
So everything we've talked about now has been about crisis prevention, saving a life in the moment.
Right.
But the sources also address a vastly different legal question, which is the right to die. That's physician-assisted suicide, or PAS.
Exactly. And this is where things get really influenced by religious philosophical views, the works. But the legal reality in the U.S. states that sanction it is that it operates under extremely strict guidelines.
Yeah, there are rigorous safeguards. The legal sources lay out a few key requirements. The patient has to be a resident of the state and at least 18 years old.
And crucially, they must have an estimated 6 months or less to live. That terminal prognosis is essential.
So it's purely for end-of-life decisions. It distinguishes it completely, legally, and ethically from a mental health crisis.
Absolutely. And even then, the patient has to be the one to initiate it. They have to make at least 2 verbal requests and 1 written request to a physician.
That regulatory depth just highlights how far removed PAS is from the impulsive nature of what we were discussing earlier.
A different world.
So, wrapping this up, it seems we've got 2 huge takeaways. The first is just the absolute necessity of direct communication when you're assessing risk in a crisis.
You have to ask the question.
You just have to. And the second is understanding the incredibly rigorous framework that surrounds physician-assisted suicide.
And maybe one final provocative thought to leave you with. If we step back, you see how much culture shapes this entire conversation.
How so?
Well, in cultures with, say, Judeo-Christian traditions, life is often considered a gift, and taking one's life is a sin.
Which can correlate with lower rates, yeah.
But in contrast, you have traditions associated with something like the Shinto religion, where suicide might be viewed as an honorable solution to a problem.
A totally different perspective.
Completely. So the big question the sources leave us with is this. How does a society balance its duty to preserve life with respecting an individual's will to choose their end? Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing a really targeted extraction of knowledge on personality disorders. or PDs?
Right, we're going straight to the source material for the definitions, the causes, and, what actually works in terms of treatment.
So let's start with basics. We all have a personality. It's just how we see the world, how we interact.
Exactly. But the source material is very clear. A personality disorder is different. It's this enduring and really inflexible pattern of behavior and inner experience that, well, it deviates hugely from what's culturally expected.
Right. And the sources kept using this one phrase for their coping strategies, primitive and immature. Okay, so let's unpack that. What exactly does the clinical literature mean by primitive?
We will definitely circle back to that when we hit cluster B, because that's where it really shines through. But first, etiology, the cause. I mean, there's no single thing you can point to.
No single cause, but the research we have it's pretty overwhelming that genetics play a dominant role.
A huge role.
You see those classic studies of identical twins who were raised apart, their personalities were way more similar than fraternal twins.
Yeah.
It really points to a biological foundation.
And that's especially true for the disorders in cluster A, the paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal types.
But it's not just genetics. The psychological side is, well, it's childhood trauma. That's named as a major risk factor.
A very significant risk factor.
Yeah.
But regardless of the cause, you see these shared maladaptive patterns across all PDs in 4 areas. Cognition, so how a person thinks.
Okay.
Affectivity, which is basically their emotional response.
Let us show emotion.
Exactly. Then interpersonal functioning, and finally, impulse control.
Which brings us to how the source material groups all of this. This is where it gets really interesting with the 3 clusters. Cluster A, B, and C. So cluster A is the odd or eccentric group. Think suspicious, withdrawn, socially detached.
Yeah, and a really powerful example from that cluster is schizoid PD. You're looking at someone who just seems unable to form close relationships. They don't seem to take pleasure in much.
And the material notes that they sometimes pour all of that energy into non-human interests, right? Like math or astronomy.
That's a classic feature. Now, cluster B, this is the one people are often more familiar with, the dramatic, emotional, or erratic group.
This includes antisocial PD. So
Yeah.
we're talking about a disregard for other people's rights, a real lack of remorse. Can be very charming, very manipulative.
And this is where that primitive coping idea comes back in. To deal with stress, they might use defenses like splitting.
Seeing people as either all good or all bad. No middle ground.
None. Or acting out, showing their feelings through intense behavior instead of just saying, I'm angry. And that instability is, it's clearest in borderline PD, BPD.
Right. Unstable mood, unstable self-image, and these incredibly intense relationships that just swing from you're perfect to you're worthless.
And frantic efforts to avoid being abandoned.
Then you have the last group, cluster C, the anxious or fearful one.
Tense, over-controlled, everything is driven by anxiety.
And the main example here is obsessive-compulsive PD. OCPD. It's that preoccupation with rules and order and perfectionism that's so extreme, it actually stops them from getting anything done.
And the source notes, they can be extremely stingy with money. It's all part of that need for control.
So if we connect all this to the bigger picture, you have to remember that people with PDs often have other things going on.
Oh, absolutely. Co-occurring conditions are the norm, not the exception. Substance use, depression, anxiety disorders, you name it. So safety is always the first priority.
And for treatment, the research points towards therapies based on CBT. But for BPD specifically, you mentioned DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. It has 4 core skills. In a crisis moment, which is the one they need most.
That would be distress tolerance. DBT is so effective because it does 2 things at once. It validates the patient's intense emotion. It says, yes, this feels awful, while also teaching them concrete skills to manage the crisis without making it worse.
So it's teaching them how to survive those emotional waves.
It is. It gives them a toolkit built around mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, emotional regulation, and that critical distress tolerance piece.
So after all this, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener?
Well, while DBT helps the patient build an internal structure, the source material absolutely stresses that the treatment team, everyone involved, has to act in a consistent and congruent manner.
And that leads us to our final thought. Considering the real risk of manipulative behaviors or even causing conflict among staff, how critical is that external structure, like a formal, written plan of care with clear boundaries, for a patient whose internal world is defined by chaos? It really suggests the system itself has to provide the stability that the patient is working to build.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to get into anxiety disorders, and obsessive compulsive and related disorders.
Right.
And our mission here is really just to give you a shortcut, a way to understand that critical line between, healthy anxiety and when it crosses over into a disorder.
And I think we have to start with the most basic idea, which is that anxiety itself,
Yeah.
it's the most fundamental human emotion. What's really fascinating is that the behaviors we see, they aren't the problem. They're actually a defense against the anxiety.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. So you're saying the symptom is it's the body's attempt at a cure that just isn't working.
In a way, yes, a maladaptive one.
Wow. Okay, that changes the whole frame. So let's unpack the basics then.
Yeah.
We use anxiety and fear all the time, right? Interchangeably.
We do, and it's a huge mistake. They're very different.
What's the core distinction?
It's all about specificity.
Yeah.
Fear is a reaction to a specific known danger. You see a car speeding toward you, that's fear.
Right, a clear and present threat.
Exactly. Anxiety, on the other hand, is this feeling of dread, where the source is often vague, or maybe you don't even recognize it.
And this is where the spectrum gets really interesting. We see three main types.
Right. First, you have just normal anxiety.
The healthy kind. The thing that, makes Alex cram for her chemistry test. It's a life force, really, a motivator.
It's a survival mechanism, absolutely. Yeah. But then you get into acute anxiety.
Okay, and that's different.
Very different. It's triggered by an imminent major loss or a sudden threat. It's that immediate flood of distress.
A total shock to the system.
Right. And then finally, there's chronic anxiety.
And that's the one that sticks around. It's defined by its duration, its intensity.
Yeah.
This is where we see someone like Mr. Jones who hasn't left his house in months.
Exactly. And when anxiety goes chronic, the mind starts to build these systems to cope. We call them defense mechanisms.
And these are mostly unconscious, right?
Largely unconscious, yes. And they can be healthy, using humor or altruism, or just consciously pushing a worry aside for later.
Suppression, yeah.
But they can also be, pathological, maladaptive, things like denial or projection. They just keep the anxiety loop going.
And when those pathological defenses fail, that's when anxiety becomes this systemic poison. Our sources show it goes hand in hand with major depression.
And with physical conditions, cancer, irritable bowel syndrome, a reduced immune system.
So it's a true whole body problem.
A true whole body problem. And this is why recognizing the specific disorders is so vital. Take a panic attack.
Right.
It's a sudden extreme terror. It's so severe that normal function just stops.
And the physical symptoms are so intense, chest pain, shortness of breath, that people really think they're having a heart attack.
They go straight to the emergency room. Happens all the time.
And then there's something like generalized anxiety disorder or GAD.
Which is really that chronic state we were talking about.
Yeah.
It's just excessive worry, constant restlessness, fatigue, poor concentration. You're almost worrying about worrying.
Okay, so let's shift to OCD, because that interplay is fascinating.
It really is. You have the obsessions. Those are the unwanted, intrusive thoughts that cause all the distress.
And the compulsions are the rituals that someone does to try and, stop the thoughts.
To reduce the anxiety caused by the thoughts. The behavior is a direct, if illogical, response to the thought.
But here's the thing that really stood out. While severe OCD is obviously debilitating, some mild obsessive compulsive behaviors, being meticulous, super organized.
A neat freak. Yeah.
Yeah. In U.S. society, those are actually considered valued traits, necessary for success even.
It's a strange paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
But clinically, we know this is a biological problem. It's rooted in imbalances in brain chemistry.
Which is the good news, right? It means there are robust evidence-based treatments.
Absolutely. Both medication and behavior therapy techniques like systematic desensitization or even flooding.
So effective recovery is possible because it's a problem rooted in measurable biology.
Exactly. So what does this all mean at the end of the day?
It means you're dealing with a huge spectrum, something that ranges from a necessary evolutionary tool all the way to a life-constricting disorder.
A disorder driven by these unconscious defenses we build.
So a final thought for you to take away. We know a panic attack can mimic a heart attack so perfectly it sends people to the ER.
Right.
If a brief, acute episode can have that kind of profound physical effect, just take a moment to consider the immense, tangible physical burden that unmanaged, persistent anxiety places on every single system in the body. It's not just in your head, it's a constant war happening inside your biology.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on a huge topic, really. We're looking at a whole stack of sources on the physiology of stress and trauma.
Our mission is basically to understand the body's emergency brake system.
How it saves us, but also why it sometimes, locks up and gets us stuck.
Right. And the first thing the sources clarify is that not all stress is bad. There's what they call eustress.
That's the good kind?
Yeah, exactly. The productive stress that helps you meet a deadline, it's actually necessary for growth. But then there's distress.
And that's the one we all know. The kind that causes real problems.
The kind that, if you're living with it, you know the feeling. The irritability, trouble sleeping.
Just feeling tense all the time or completely powerless.
But the long-term cost is what's really terrifying. I mean, the sources suggest the body just doesn't know the difference between, say, a physical threat and a toxic work environment.
So the physical toll is the same.
Devastatingly so. Prolonged distress can lead to stomach ulcers, asthma, even heart disease and cancer. Not to mention conditions like depression.
Okay, so that's the core question, isn't it? How does the body flip that switch into high alert? Let's talk about that initial immediate burst.
We're talking about the autonomic nervous system. It has two modes. The sympathetic nervous system, the SNS, that's the gas pedal for fight or flight.
And the parasympathetic, the PNS, is the brake, the rest and digest system.
Perfect. And the whole thing starts with the amygdala.
So is it fair to call the amygdala the body's smoke detector?
That's a great way to put it. It senses danger and sends an immediate signal to the hypothalamus.
Which then flips on the SNS.
Exactly. And that signals the adrenal glands to release epinephrine. That's the immediate, adrenaline rush you feel when a car cuts you off.
Right, but that adrenaline fades pretty fast.
Yeah.
So what happens when the threat or the stress doesn't go away? How does the body keep that emergency feeling going?
Well, that's where the body's sustained vigilance system kicks in. It's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis.
The HPA axis, okay.
If the brain keeps perceiving a threat, this axis releases cortisol. And cortisol is what keeps that energy state heightened. It's essential for survival, but it becomes toxic when you can't turn it off.
So if that system stays on, especially after something truly catastrophic, I mean, an event that's way outside the range of normal human experience.
Then you're moving into the territory of clinical trauma disorders.
Right.
Like PTSD.
Right. Post-traumatic stress disorder. And the core symptoms are that feeling of powerlessness, but also things like flashbacks, nightmares.
And a deep avoidance of anything that could be a reminder of the event.
And the sources are really clear on one thing you need to remember. The key difference between PTSD and acute stress disorder, or ASD.
It's all about the timeline.
Exactly. Same triggers, same symptoms, but with ASD, they resolve within a month. If they last longer, you're looking at PTSD.
We should also touch on the cost of caring for others. The sources call it secondary traumatic stress.
Or compassion fatigue.
Yeah. It's the cumulative effect of working with people who are suffering. Think about high-risk fields like hospice, ERs, or pediatrics.
I think people really underestimate that cost. It's not just burnout. You're sort of absorbing someone else's neurological burden.
You are. And the symptoms are intense. Intrusive thoughts about another person's trauma, a real dread of going to work, and sometimes using pretty destructive ways to cope.
Ultimately, though, all our sources seem to point to one thing. Stress requires mediation. You need coping skills, social support.
Effective defense mechanisms to stop that spiral into illness.
So for you, listening right now, what does this all mean? It means engaging in active stress reduction.
Right.
Physical activity is huge. It gets those endorphins going.
Or mindfulness, meditation, even just reaching out for strong social support.
Yeah.
But the final thought we want to leave you with, the thing that connects all of this, is the idea of trauma-informed care.
What does that mean exactly?
It's a whole approach, really. It's a framework that acknowledges just how common trauma is, and it works to make sure that our systems, medical, legal, educational, don't accidentally re-traumatize people. Just understanding that deep physiological impact is essential awareness for all of us.